Welcome to Austin Community College Advanced Woodworking class. Now, today's class we're going to focus on sanding, and as you remember, the last thing we did was we finished the shaping of our parts. And as you know, the very next step is going to be to sand. So we're going to move down through the grits one grit at a time. We'll start with 120 grit, 180, 240, and 320. This is a good time to remind everybody about where we are in the sequence of building a piece of furniture. I started with concept and design, then model building and prototyping, and that led to the cut list. Now, we began this class at step 4 with the selection of material. You made your selections and roughed them out, and we allowed a week's rest. The next week we milled those parts to the final size. Then we were able to begin the joinery, step 7. In our last class, we did the shaping of the parts. Well, tonight we're going to talk about sanding. All right, so I've gathered the parts that we're going to be sanding tonight, and I've organized them into the right-hand side and the left-hand side, because I'm going to work on them one set at a time. So we have the legs, the bottom side rail, the side rail. For the left-hand side, the legs, bottom side rail, the side rail for the right-hand side. The labeling of the parts that came in so handy in the fitting of the tenons is now going to play a big role in keeping track of these parts. I'm going to start with sanding one of these side rails because it has some interesting complications. So let's take this over to the bench. The side rail has this recess cut into the middle, which is somewhat of a challenge to sand. I'm going to show you, we could just attack this with 80 grit and go for it. I want to show you what some of the problems might be. You can see the line there. We cut this in several passes. And the different depths make that quite a challenge. Now we could hit that with 80 grit, like I said, and just work our way through. But this might be a good opportunity to start with a cabinet scraper and reduce that. We're going to take a large scraper like this and sharpen the end of it. So I've put one in the vise here for us. We're going to use a fine mill file. And we're going to come right across the top of this thing. Let me get this a little deeper set. There we go. I want to cut across this until I've got a nice flat surface all the way across. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to use this diamond, 600 grit diamond, flatten that out, take the burr off of the sides, like that, both sides. I want to feel that there's an absolutely smooth edge on that. It feels pretty good. Now I'm going to take a burnisher, and a burnisher is just a hardened steel rod with a handle. Now if you don't own a burnisher, but you have a good quality screwdriver, you can use that. Usually it takes a good quality hard steel shaft. So we're going to take the burnisher and come across this at about 5 degrees and move with the direction like that. So I'm tilting slightly down, and I'm going to push at a moderate hardness. I'm going to do that 3 or 4 times. And now I'm going to come this way and do the same thing. And we can feel, you know, if we've got a burr, and I can feel a really nice burr there. All right, let's put the side rail back in the vise. And this is the true test to see if we did any good with our sharpening. So there's the burred edge. It's kind of a slicing motion. And we can see we've got a nice curl coming off of there. And what I really want is to get rid of that step. Look at that nice curl. Alright, so we've gotten that in flat. We'll come down here and work this in. It's always kind of dangerous working out towards the end. I'm going to come this way. Got a little bit out at the end. I don't mind too much if I'll leave a little bit at the end because I know that I can sand that out if it's not too major. Alright, so I'm feeling flat all the way across here. The next step is going to be sanding. We'll start with our coarsest grit. I'm going to use 120. There are a couple of different materials I like for sanding. First is cork. It has just enough give and rigidity to be a nice absorbent for heat sanding block. What you want is something that will carry the heat away from the friction. These are Durablocks. Let me see if I can find their name. These are Durablocks. What I really like about these is they're easy to shape. You can see I've got one with a nice crisp edge on both surfaces, flat with a nice crisp edge. Here's one that I've rounded the corners very specifically for doing a job where I didn't want that sharp corner to be in play. You can see this guy here, I ground the nose away from him so I could reach into a tight spot. So they're very valuable. So let's start with this block. We're going to crease the sandpaper to make a nice crisp edge. The reason why I want to do that is we have this beautiful little roundover that is flowing right up out of that flat surface. We want to preserve that flat surface, but we want to preserve that little roundover. So I'm going to start at that roundover, but move away. Again, come right up to that roundover. And move away. It seems like no matter how much you think you're concentrating on the ends are always that which doesn't get sanded well enough. So pay particular attention at the ends. Use your hand, your finger to test and see, have I still got a flat surface? I've still got just a tiny bit of a rise there. I can feel it. And here. So I'm going to concentrate a little more on that. It's nice to have a brush handy. You can use it to push the dust away. And be able to inspect the surface. Absolute best way to inspect the surface is to let a light fall horizontally across it. You're looking for any sort of imperfections. A little divot, a little scratch. Okay, I found a little divot right there. It's just a little place where the grain has sort of torn out. So I'm going to come back and work on that area. And you notice I'm spreading my energy across there, so I don't want to just dish that out. Very good. So that took care of that. Now that was not too much work. And we're done with 120 grit. So I'm going to use my pencil and just kind of pencil this surface up, because we're going to switch to the next grit. The next grit down is going to be 180. We're going to do the same thing, crease this, fold it tightly so that we don't have a round, we don't really want a rounded surface. And we're going to sand until that pencil line is gone. So I'm going to start again at the corner or at the edge and move away. Let's get this side. Again, we'll pay a little bit more attention at these ends. Okay, let's brush that off and see what we have. At this point, there's no more imperfections. All we're doing is removing the scratches from the previous grit. Okay? Oh, that's looking beautiful. Okay. Very, very nice. Let's pencil it up again. At this point, we're going to speed the video up because you get the sequence. We're going to move to 240 grit. Again, you're going to crease that paper around the sanding block so that you can work away from that delicate little round over. And I'm starting at the round over, but I'm moving quickly away from it once I've sanded it once. You brush it off, get your light out, take a good look, make sure you've gotten all the pencil out and that you don't have any imperfections that you might have missed the first time. You're going to now move down to 320 grit. Again, grease your paper. Also that you won't damage that round over. You want to move away from the round over. Pencil it up. You can tell when you're done. Start at the round over, move away from it. You want to do a really thorough job on the ends. Don't neglect the ends. Brush it off and inspect it for the last time. Ah, nothing like a beautifully sanded cherry finish. The next step is going to be to take care of these two outer sides. I don't know if you can see, but you can see the mill marks pretty clearly in person. So the goal here is going to be to get rid of those mill marks with the 120 grit. I'm going to go after that. I wish I could sand this fast in real life. Now, a careful inspection, I can still see a tiny little step right there, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's going to come out with the 180 grit. All right, we've got the imperfections out, and now we're going to 180 grit it, and we'll mark it up again and do our 220 grit. And again, because this is going to be an oil finish, we're going to go one more grit. We'll pencil it up and do 320. All that's left now is going to be that little round over. So let's take care of that little round over. We want to preserve the finish that we just created on that flat, so we're going to mask off that area right up to the round over. Okay, and we want to just sand the round over, so we don't need anything really coarse. I'm going to pick 220, about 1/8 of a sheet folded into thirds. And now I'm going to just blend that round over right into the flat surface and straight down to the recess. Just a really well-defined, crisp detail. I don't want to end up flattening that round over. I want it to be a very distinctive round transition from flat to round. And there we go. Now the last detail we want to do on this is this little inset. I'm just going to use 120 to smooth this little inset out. It doesn't take much. There's a little spot I missed. There we go. Okay, now that takes care of this side. Let's flip it over. Now the inside of this is the inside of the cabinet where the drawer runs, but we're not going to sand it at this point until it's glued up into a sub-assembly. This area here, we'd like for it to feel smooth. So I'm going to take some 180 grit and just smooth it down so that if you reach inside the cabinet, it at least feels smooth. Now do the same thing on these sharp edges, just break them a little bit by hand. And that way, it just is nice to the touch. But again, that surface doesn't matter until later. That leaves one last surface to take care of, and that's the bottom. So let's flip it over sideways. We're going to start with 120 grit and just get rid of any of the imperfections that happened when we were flush trimming and rounding over. I've picked a sanding block that has a bit of a radius in it to assist with that. Yeah, we'll get rid of those imperfections. Then you know the routine from here. We're going to go down through the grits and 180, 220, and then finally ease those round overs into that surface, maintaining the round over, but having it flow from a flat, a true radius, down to the other flat. Okay, a little touch up by hand, and now this part is ready to glue up. We're ready now to look at the bottom side rail and the legs, and that'll be tomorrow's lesson.